We'll start chapter 21. Okay, the structural organization of animals. Okay, so we'll be getting through the body systems uh, and kind of the main anatomy and physiology of animals. Okay, so it'll be a little more interesting, a little more easier to understand. Um, the information shouldn't be too bad. Okay, compared to the previous stuff that we've been talking about. Um, this information should be relatively familiar for those of you who are any bit interested in biology. Another quick thing before we get started, I wanted to talk about the paper topic. I think um, we have the paper topic kids due today, so try to get that done. I think you have till the end of the week to submit it, October 31st, but please try to have it done by today. So just upload what you want to write your paper on, and just a topic that you're interested in. Remember, this is something that you're going to be able to write a little essay on. Okay, so a couple thought or about 1,500 word essay, and you're going to have a little presentation on it at the end of the semester. So 10-minute presentation. Okay, so it's going to be, your grade is going to be determined by the paper as well as the presentation. And just be able to find a topic that you enjoy and that you think you're going to enjoy reading about, and that you think you're going to be able to find a decent amount of information. Remember, you can use IFL Science. It's IFL Science. Just type it into Google, right? So I think I showed you before on a previous lecture. So you just come here, right, into Google, IFL Science. You can come here, and there is, oh wow, look at IFL prion disease, which is interesting. So there's a lot of other scientists accidentally discovered new organ inside the human head. I don't know how valid that is, but Alaska's ice melting could trigger mega tsunami, right? There's a lot of different topics in science that you could utilize here. So you do have environment, technology, space, health and medicine, the brain, right? There's all these different topics that you can pick from: chemistry, and I wouldn't take policy or editor's block, but these are all good here. Even has information on the fossil record, topics about evolution, things like that. So I usually come on here pretty often just to kind of see what's going on in the world, and just to see what new and exciting science is out there, right? Because I'm a microbiologist by trade, so I read a lot of microbiology papers. But it's nice to see other things like science or astrology, astronomy, and like psychology, things like that. So there's a lot of really nice, interesting topics here that you can pull from. Okay, so it's a good resource. Anyways, that'll get you started. Okay, so please try to get that done. All right. All right. So structure and organization. So structural hierarchy in a human. So we think cells, tissue, and then organ, right? So think cells are going to be individual cells that make up tissue. The tissue can be anything from heart tissue to a liver to kidney to skin, epithelial, mucosal, epidermal tissue, right? There's a lot of different types of tissues that can make up a lot of different types of organ systems in the body. And remember, each one of these cells, even if it's a heart cell or a skin cell or an eye cell or a foot cell, liver, kidney, nerve, spinal cord, doesn't matter, contains the same exact genetic information, contains the same exact copy of the genome that every other cell carries in your body, right? So this development, remember, this development is going to be controlled by those homeotic genes, right? Those genes that are going to be making sure that each cell is going to be representative of that organ system, right? You're not going to find your heart cells growing in your brain. At least you shouldn't, right? Because it could indicate some terrible condition. And gene regulation is key for that, right? Being able to have a hierarchy or a simple all the way to a more complex organization of tissues and cells into organs. Okay, that is advanced development. That is uh, um, very controlled gene expression, right? Because you have this huge organism comparatively to microscopic organisms that's able to develop multi-organ systems and very complex organ systems through a single set of genetic information, right? That all the cells contain. So again, um, yeah, complex organisms need this hierarchical structure, right? Various cells, all the way up into organ systems through tissues. All right, anatomy and physiology. So life is characterized by a hierarchy of organization. Cells are grouped into tissues, and tissues combine into functional organ systems. Anatomy is a study of the structure of an organism and its parts. Physiology is a study of the function of an organism's structural equipment. Okay, remember, structure supports the function. Anatomy supports the physiology, right? You're not going to have something that's anatomically not suitable for the physiology. Okay, so everything has a function, everything has a place, right? We're very organized, we're very well conditioned to do the things that they're going to do, and that structure is going to support that. Okay, so tissues, they're an integrated group of similar cells that performs a specific function within a multicellular organism. So epithelial tissue, this is a sheet of tightly packed cells lining organisms and cavities, also called epithelium. This tissue specializes in as a gatekeeper to the body, right? Protection, absorption, and gas exchange are the main um, points or the main motives of epithelial tissue, right? High cell division in this tissue, which means 80% of cancers arise from epithelial tissue, right? So, again, epithelial tissue is going to be lining a lot of organ systems, your gut, your GI tract, your skin. Think of all the cancers that you come into contact with, right? That you see on a daily basis, right? You see a lot of carcinomas or melanomas, right? That's skin cancer. That's on the epithelial tissue. Colon cancer, right? That's going to be the polyps or the tumors developing in the colon, and that's typically epithelial tissue that you'll see become transformed, okay, and cancerous, right? So again, the skin's multiple layers of epithelial cells serve as a protective role, whereas a lining of capillaries contains a single leaky layer of epithelial cells that promote exchange, right? So again, examples of organs lined with epithelial tissue: heart, lung, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, urinary bladder, right? These are all areas that are, I mean, this is pretty much every area of your body that's going to be lined with epithelial tissue, right? Um, epithelial tissue lining carry capillaries allows for exchange of nutrients and gas. Okay, so epithelial cells covering the body, so the skin. Okay, right. So this can be damaged by UV radiation, causing the cancers. Right, and look at all the different areas where you can where you have this tissue. Right, it's going to be everywhere. Very important. Okay, so connective tissue. So this is going to be like that next layer of tissue. So think of epithelial tissue as a surface. Connective tissue is going to be just beneath that. Okay, so connective tissue consists of cells held in an abundant extracellular matrix. Again, that basal layer you'll see many times in like a skin cut out. Extracellular matrix is going to be the meshwork that surrounds animal cells, consisting of a web of protein and polysaccharide fibers embedded in a liquid, jelly, or solid. Okay, so again, this is going to be that fascia, that substance that's going to be around that tissue in order to keep that tissue in place, right? These cells are not going to be holding themselves together just by the grace of their own ability, right? You're going to need something that allows for the connection or the connectivity of those cells. And one of the main things is extracellular matrix. Okay, and again, it can be made from proteins or polysaccharide fibers, which are sugar fibers, right? So think of this as kind of that glue that holds the cells together in that area where they're at. Types of connective tissue. We have loose connective tissue, the most widespread connective tissues in the vertebrate body. It binds epithelial to underlying tissues. Okay, so again, it's that layer that you see sometimes in a skin cutout where it's directly underneath the epithelium. That's going to be it almost looks messy and kind of unorganized, but that's going to be that thick, nice layer that's going to be holding that tissue together. Okay. Um, yeah. So if you ever cut into, or if you accidentally cut yourself and you see that layer directly underneath your epithelium, which I hope you haven't, it would be a bad cut, and you can almost see that it's like, it's not as organized as that top layer of skin, right? It's going to be that kind of part where you separate the meat and you see that webbing in that tissue. Okay. We have fibrous connective tissue, a dense tissue with larger numbers of collagen fibers organized into parallel bundles. This is an abundant tissue in tendons and ligaments. Okay. So this you should never see unless you have a very bad injury, right? So this is going to be found in the tendons or ligaments, right? So the tendons is going to be muscle to bone, where ligaments are going to be bone to bone, right? So ligaments hold bone together, whereas tendons are going to be the things that provide the movement of your musculoskeletal system. Okay. So like your Achilles tendon, again, that's good. That's a good way to remember, because the Achilles tendon attaches to your heel all the way through up to your calf, right? It's going to be kind of holding that in place. So if you lose that Achilles tendon, you don't have the ability to really extend your foot out, right? Because again, that's going to be the muscle to bone, whereas tendons are bone to bone, all right? And this is going to be very, very strong. It's going to hold the areas of your body together that have the most pressure and have the most force. Okay. Again, muscle to bone movement is quite forceful. You need something very, very strong to hold that together. So that's fibrous connective tissue. Okay. Whereas loose connective tissue, again, you can play with your skin and stretch it, right? That's going to allow for a lot of movement, right? So that's going to be the loose connective tissue. If you can stretch your skin, it's very difficult to stretch out your Achilles tendon, right? That's that. If you feel your Achilles tendon in the back of your heel, just above your heel, you can feel how tight that is, right? And that's going to be that hard, very strong, very dense connective tissue there. Cartilage, type of connective tissue consisting of living cells embedded in a rubbery matrix with collagen fibers. And cartilage is very interesting. It's very different, right? Many times you hear people are losing cartilage in their knees or in their back, and again, this is because of the ability of these cells to grow. Right, you're born. Well, you develop cartilage in the joints, right, and you develop cartilage in different areas of your body, such as your trachea and other softer areas that require flexibility, like your ear. Um, and the issue with cartilage is it doesn't get a lot of blood flow. Okay. So it's harder to heal areas that have been worn, that the cartilage has been worn down, such as your lower lumbar spine or your knees, right? Sometimes those areas lack the sufficient blood flow and lack the ability to grow the cartilage back again. Okay, so you need a long time kind of allowing that to relax, allowing giving your knees a break. You see a lot of cartilage injuries a lot with athletes, or a lot people that are a little bit more heavy. Again, because of the wearing out of the cartilage occurs much faster, right? I have a brother that was in the Marine Corps, and he marched a lot, and the doctor always tells him your knees are pretty much bone to bone, which means that you're lacking that cartilage that's going to be allowing for the fluid movement in those joints. Okay, right? Arthritis is going to be your body attacking. Well, rheumatoid arthritis is your body attacking those joints. Okay, so and again, those joints will be worn out. That's why you'll see the swelling, and you have the inability to move the joints in some individuals, right? Because the issue there is again that wearing out of the joint, but again, it's your immune system mounting an inappropriate response to those joints. Yeah, so there's rheumatoid arthritis. There's osteoarthritis, which is a little bit different. That's typically what you see in bad backs, but that's osteoarthritis is actually bone growth and bony protrusion, so a little bit different. So speaking of bone, so bone is a type of connective tissue consisting of living cells held in a rigid matrix of collagen fibers embedded in calcium salts. So bone is again, it is considered connective tissue because it is the osteocyte, which is a bone cell. It's going to be dumping these collagen fibers with the calcium salts, and there's different types of bones, different types of bone, right? There's spongy bone, and there's hard bone or calcified bone. So there's a little bit different things to get into with bone, but we'll talk about those later. Adipose tissue, this is the type of connective tissue in which the cells contain fat, okay? And these cells are found throughout your body. There's a couple of different types of fats as well. There's something called brown fat that a lot of younger children contain to ensure that they are warm. Brown fat usually allows for heat to be produced in that adipose tissue, whereas regular adipose tissue that we have as adults is going to be used for storage, right? Storage and protection, okay, right? Yeah, we should have a nice layer of fat over our body anyways, but not too much. Blood, so blood is actually considered a connective tissue with the fluid matrix called plasma, and which blood cells calls, shoot. Sorry, I hate seeing the typos. I gotta fix them now. All right, so which blood cells are suspended, okay? So anyways, blood is as connective tissue. Oh, excuse me. All right, so types of connective tissue, we have loose connective tissue. Again, that's going to be found in our fascia or in our just beneath our epithelial tissue, right? So I think it was just showing you the skin and the knee, right? So you'll see embedded cells, these tiny itty bitty little cells, and then you see a lot of collagen or other types of extracellular matrix that's surrounding, right? The spacing between the cells is important. Okay, so you have a little bit of cells with a lot of connective tissue. All right. So here we have fibrous connective tissue. And again, this is forming a tendon. So this is going to be bone to muscle to bone, right? So again, shown here, whereas ligaments are bone to bone, right? And again, this is going to be much thicker. You have the cells are much more spaced out. This tissue is mainly made from the extracellular matrix that those cells secrete. Okay, so very strong fibers. Again, you can feel the back of or you can feel the Achilles tendon and right just above your heel, and you can feel how thick that is, how hard that is compared to your skin, right? If you grab your skin, you move your skin around, that epithelial tissue underneath that is that extracellular matrix that's going to allow for that stretchy movement. Okay, that compared to the loose connective tissue, you can tell a complete difference, right? This is going to be very strong. Another thing to mention too is that this is very similar to cartilage, right? So here we have cartilage at the end of the bone. Again, we talked about cartilage surrounding these joints, right? There's this bone right here is going to contain cartilage. And again, you have this cartilage that's going to protect the bone, prevent the rubbing of bone because bone on bone is quite rough. And this is going to be lubricated, right? Almost like a synovial joint. The synovial joint is going to have some lubrication between those two bone contact points. Okay, and that's what cartilage is for. Once you wear this down, it's very difficult to get this cartilage back. Okay, it takes a lot of time for cartilage to grow, so you have to maintain your cartilage. You have to make sure that you're not overusing or overworking. Eventually, you'll have the breakdown of the cartilage as you get older, but you want to make sure that that cartilage is there for as long as it possibly can be. Okay, or else you're going to have very bad issues, right? You don't want to wear them down. Here we have bone right here. We have the cells, the osteocytes, and that matrix. Okay, so yeah, these little individual lacuna or these circular tracks. Each of these holes are going to contain a blood or a blood vessel, such as a capillary from your artery into your veins, and then you every now and then you'll have a nerve root that passes through this canal as well. Okay, what else? Okay, so blood, right? So here's showing an artery. You do have red cells and you have white cells. Again, this is also considered connective tissue, and then adipose tissue, right? So these individual things you see here are cells. So that is the nucleus and the cell contents, and this whole area of the fat cell is actually going to be a vacuole that contains lipids. Okay, and again, so this cell is very small. and the actual cell contents are very small compared to the storage or the adipose tissue that you see there. Okay. All right, muscle tissue. Tissue consisting of long muscle cells that are capable of contracting when stimulated by nerve impulses. Skeletal muscle, striated muscle attached to the skeleton. The contraction of striated muscle produces voluntary movements of the body. Okay. Um, and then cardiac muscle, striated muscle that forms the contractile tissue of the heart. Smooth muscle, muscle made up of cells without striations found in the walls. Okay, so there are a few different types of muscles, right? We have cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Cardiac and smooth are non-voluntary, which means that you cannot control the movements of cardiac and smooth muscles. Okay, skeletal muscles, yes. Skeletal muscles, right? You can contract, move, um, and even skeletal muscles can be non-voluntary, right? If someone throws a ball at your face, you're going to flinch. That's skeletal muscle movement right there. But that can be controlled as well by non-voluntary movements. Cardiac muscle, you shouldn't voluntarily be able to stop your heart. Okay, there have been some people that have been able to do that through various meditation practices, but it is definitely not recommended. Okay, smooth muscle, again, you don't control how your stomach is digesting your food. I'm not eating and then thinking like, all right, I'm going to contract my stomach to start, churning in that food and then passing it through my duodenum. No, you don't do that. Your muscles are taken care of by your brain, and they allow for that the movement of the food involuntarily, right? Your body does that by itself. So cardiac and smooth muscle, non-voluntary movement versus skeletal, which you actually can move. Okay. Um, so again, three types of muscles. You should be able to identify these, right? So you have skeletal muscles, highly organized, right? You'll see these striations and you'll see these cells, right? So cell and cell fiber, and we'll get into muscles a little bit later in terms of in depth, right? You have the nuclei again, and then here you have muscle fibers. So it's important to note that these junctions between the cells, these cells talk to each other readily, right? Cardiac cells are very different in terms of they're able to receive that impulse from the different nodes in the heart that are they're going to allow for that electrical connection, right? And they're going to beat as one. They're going to beat in unison as long as that electrical impulse passes through that heart, right? That's why it's important to have those your it's important to have a heart that's controlled properly. Okay, again, these cells beat in unison, they contract in order, and that's just to make sure that you have a proper pumping of the heart, right? You don't want different cells contracting at different times, again, because that will provide an inefficient pump or volume when the heart contracts. Excuse me, and they'll have improper pumping. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. So cardiac muscle is very special in that way, right? Where you do have the controlled contraction of the heart, and these muscles don't stop. Okay. Um, thank you, Lucia. All right. So smooth muscle. We do have smooth muscle in our GI tract, right? In our stomach, in our gut, in our bowel, in our small intestine, and large intestine, right? This is going to be involuntary and slow movements, right? It's going to be pushing that food through and out, right, for absorption. All right. So involuntary muscles in your blood vessels cause you to blush, right? Again, this is going to be in your arteries and in your veins. Again, those muscles are going to be those smooth muscles or those involuntary muscles. Okay. So nervous tissue. So tissue is made up of neurons and supportive cells. So the majority of the cells are going to be supportive cells. They're going to support the neurons, which are immortal, right? These cells are going to be sticking around just as long as you will, right? So they tell you be careful with how many brain cells you lose. You only have a finite number, but you do not have a finite number of supportive cells. So the majority of time, the cancers that form in the brain tumors, they're not neurons. They're going to be from the supportive tissue. Okay. So yeah. So a neuron is a nerve cell. The fundamental structural and functional unit of the nervous system, specialized for carrying signals from one location of the body to another. Okay, so here we have a dendrite and an axon. Again, the message is received in the dendritic zone, the dendrites, right? The nucleus can decide whether or not to send the signal out. Then it'll send the signal through the axon, where they have other uh, um, synaptic places here at the tips of the axon that are going to be received by another dendrite, right? And it can essentially pass from the brain systemically throughout the body. Okay. Organs and organ systems. So an organ is a structure consisting of two or more tissues that coordinate to perform specific functions. An organ system is a group of organs that work together in performing vital bodily functions, right? So you have an organ system such as the GI system or the GI tract. You have the stomach, you have the small intestine, you have the large intestine. That organ system's huge, right? It has a lot of the organ space in the body. But you also have nephrology, the study of kidneys. So there's an organ system, the kidney, the excretory system, right? That's going to contain your kidneys, your urethra, your bladder, right? So organ systems again are larger systems. Okay. So you have the muscular system, you have the digestive system, urinary system, again, kidneys, ureter, integumentary system. This is the largest system. This is going to be that outer system where you're thinking of your skin and your hair and everything that's on the outside of your body. Lymphatic system. This is going to be the draining or the pulling of waste products that's going to be contained here. It's also going to be important for immune function. We have nervous system, right? It's going to contain all the nerves. You have the reproductive system, your gametes or gonads. Endocrine system, think of your pancreas, your adrenal, your testes. These are going to be your hormones that are going to be dumped into your body. Respiratory system, your upper respiratory tract and your lungs, your bronchioles, your trachea, right? These are all going to be important there. And the circulatory system, which is your blood, okay? Oh, and then your skeletal system, which is the structure, okay? So there's a few different systems here. Okay, exchanges within the external environment. Organisms require a balance of energy gas exchange with their environment. Open system, any system that exchanges chemicals and energy with surroundings. All organisms are open systems. Okay. Again, we need to exchange gas and nutrients with our environment. Okay. So we have contact of a simple organism with the environment. We have exchange, single cells, the entire surface area of the cell, single-celled organism, such as this amoeba, contacts the environment because of its small size. The organism has a large surface area relative to its volume, through which it exchanges materials with the external world. Okay, so there is a limit to where to the size of cells. All right. It's really dependent on the surface area to volume ratio. So if your volume is really large, but your surface area is much smaller. So think of a basketball compared to a single cell. The surface area of that single cell is going to be large compared to its volume when you think of a basketball, right? It's going to be much larger at smaller levels. So this is why you don't have cells that are past a certain point. You need to be able to exchange gases and materials with the environment in order to be sufficient. Okay, so this is why larger organisms require more complex systems in order to maintain homeostasis, right? And homeostasis is referring to that normal state that we are in, right? This is going to be why we have a body temperature of 98 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Or 32 degrees Celsius, right? This is why we we consume or eat. This is why we have a GI tract for that. This is why we have lungs, right? It's homeostasis again is important because it's meaning we're at a normal state, okay, and we're surviving at that normal state, okay. One of the big differences between single-celled and multicellular organisms is the way that we are able to exchange or support that homeostatic event. Okay, we need to make sure our salt concentration is right. We need to make sure that we have enough energy, enough food, enough supportive tissue. Okay. And that requires a level of complexity that single cell organisms do not have to worry about. Their environment changes all the time and they deal with it, right? If our environment changes within ourselves, we deviate above or below a certain temperature, we have very severe consequences because we start having cellular death. Okay. It's just showing two cell layers. Although Hydra is multicellular, one of its cells touches an aqueous environment of the body of the Hydra as two cell layers, both exposed to water. So only two layers here of the Hydra. You have the outside for exchange, and the inside is the gastrovascular cavity. Okay, this is where you bring in food and break it down and absorb it. Okay, so less complex. For more complex animals or more complex organisms shown here, you have a few different systems working together here. We have the GI system. So this is showing you the food or mouth and then the digestive tract, right? And then you also have a closed system here, which is a circulatory system, right? And this is going to be working in unison with the urinary system as well as a respiratory system, right? The respiratory system is for gas exchange. You have a heart, which is used for blood to pass the blood through the body in order to dump oxygen and clear CO2. And then you also have the urinary system that's going to control the amount of fluid that's present in the circulatory system, right? So this is much more complex than this or this, right? And this is because we have a lot more cells that are involved in this animal system here, right? You need to have these complex systems in order to survive, in order to maintain this much tissue or this much organism. Okay, whereas you don't see this as complex in smaller organisms, even smaller multicellular organisms such as a Hydra. Okay. All right, here's showing the branch surfaces of the human lung. The lung provides a surface area for our body in order to have our gas exchange, right? When we breathe in, we exchange oxygen and CO2 there. And again, we need a lot of surface area in order to support our body, right? Whereas single cells can have gas exchange readily from their environment, we need to have a more complex system, a higher surface area in our lungs in order to have that gas exchange, right? So here we have plastic model shows the tiny air tubes of the lungs white and the tiny blood vessels red that transport gases between the hearts and lungs. Okay, so it's very, very important. Homeostasis is a steady state of the body functioning, the tendency to maintain relative constant conditions in the internal environment, even when the external environment changes, right? So I mentioned homeostasis. We need to be able to maintain that in order to survive, right? We cannot deviate above a certain temperature. We can't go be down below a certain temperature, right? We can survive in varying temperature environments, right? We can walk out in the summer and be completely fine at 105 degrees. It's going to be hot, it's going to suck, but we can still go through our day-to-day lives going through those temperatures, right? We can also live in environments that are below freezing, right? And be just fine. But we have to be at a point to maintain our body temperature, right? Just because we're at 105-degree temperature doesn't mean our body temperature is increasing above or at 105, right? Just because we live in an environment that is 0 degrees Celsius doesn't mean our bodies are going to that temperature, right? Some organisms do that, right? Endothermic organisms do that, right? We do have alligators that maintain body temperatures of their environment, but we don't, right? And it's important that we maintain that homeostasis. We maintain our salt concentrations. We maintain the amount of nutrients we have. We are at a constant state of normality in order to maintain our bodily functions and our organ systems. Okay. Intersagittal fluid. This is an aqueous solution that surrounds body cells and through which materials pass back and forth between the blood and the body tissue. Okay. Again, this is going to be helping maintain that homeostasis. Okay, this is just showing homeostatic mechanisms, right? You have environment that varies from 4 to 37 degrees Celsius. So large external changes, but we are maintaining, or this animal is maintaining this temperature, right? Constant temperature, like I mentioned before. And again, there's a lot of different mechanisms we do this. We can sweat, Dogs pant. We have rabbits or different types of small mammals that have larger ears that can actually help them cool off much faster than we can. Um, we have other animals that we'll talk about later have a larger loop of Henle, which will mean that they can be much more efficient with their water, right? Their kidneys are just much more efficient than ours. So they don't need to drink a lot of water. And these can be organisms that survive in desert conditions where there's not a lot of water present, right? So a lot of different mechanisms that provide that homeostasis for our body. Okay, so negative feedback. This is a control mechanism in which a chemical reaction, metabolic pathway, or hormone security gland is initiated by the products of a reaction pathway or gland. As the concentration of this product builds up the product molecules themselves inhibit the process that produce them. Okay, so negative feedback. So just think of this as a check system for our metabolic pathways. Okay, this is going to be very important for maintaining and allowing for or preventing an overproduction of a certain product. Okay, so think of this as an assembly line checklist, right? Your body is going to make enough of something in order for it to be useful for the body. So let's say if you're lacking some enzyme, right? And the enzyme is important in breaking down a sugar. We want that enzyme to be produced in sufficient enough amounts for that sugar to be broken down. Let's say it's like there's a lac-Z gene in bacteria, right? Remember that gene is going to be used to control or break down lactose. Lactose is that disaccharide of glucose and maltose, right? So you make enough of that lactase protein in order to break down the lactose present in the bowel or the gut that you've consumed, okay? But you don't want to make too much of it. Let's say lactose induces the lac-Z gene to make lactase. Lactase is produced. Now that end product, let's say galactose is that end product of the breakdown of that sugar, will come and inhibit that mechanism. So the end products of that mechanism are going to come back and stop this process. Okay, so positive feedback, this control mechanism in which the products stimulate the process that produce them. Okay, so you don't see this too often. You see this in breastfeeding, hormones involved in breastfeeding. You see this in ethylene gas in ripening of fruit, right? So that's one example. So let's say if you put a ripe banana next to a bunch of other green bananas, right? You have that ripening or induced ripening of those bananas. And again, this is going to be a positive feedback, but they will continue to get riper and riper until they start getting rotten. Okay. So an example of a negative feedback control of room temperature, right? So a set point, room temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. That's quite cold. 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. So energy bill is expensive, right? So stimulus room temperature is below a set point. Then we have a thermostat. So a heating event occurs to maintain that room temperature, right? Room temperature drops, and then we have heating. The response heating stops. Room temperature drops, okay? So again, you're going to have that negative feedback control. And you see this in two ways, right? If it gets too low, you have a heating. If it gets too high, you have the stopping of the heating, right? Therefore, you have a negative inhibition of temperature. Temperature negatively controls the amount of heating that needs to be done, okay? Going into thermal regulation. So this is a maintenance of internal temperature within a range that allows cells to function efficiently. Endotherm is an animal that derives most of its body heat from its own metabolism. We have an ectotherm, an animal that warms itself mainly by absorbing heat from its surroundings, right? So an endotherm, again, is an animal producing its own heat. So endo, think of inside, they produce this heat inside, whereas ectotherm is going to be an animal that absorbs the ecto or the outside environment. Okay, so again, this is alligators, and this is going to be humans, birds, and other mammals. Right, a fever is an abnormally high internal body temperature, usually as a result of an infection. Right, so moderate fever can help your immune system battle the infection. Again, a slight increase in the temperature may affect the microorganisms that are living inside your body. that are parasitic, and they're taking various nutrients and uh, vital nutrients from your body. Your increase in temperature will make that environment a little less inhabitable for those organisms. Okay, so that may or may not allow for you to pass or clear that infection more quickly. Okay, but at some point, that fever can be quite dangerous, right? You don't want a fever to last more than a few days. Okay, and you don't want a fever to go over a certain point, right? 104 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit for a little more than a few days can be quite dangerous, right? Because at that point, the individual's own proteins are going to stop working properly, right? This is why a fever just feels makes you feel so miserable too, and you lack the ability to perform your normal metabolic functions, right? All those proteins are working at a normal temperature typically, right? If you deviate above or below that, you can have some issues potentially. Okay. Osmoregulation, the control or gain and loss of water and dissolved solutes in an organism. Okay. So again, this is going to be controlling the salt concentration in your body, right? Counterbalancing water loss through drinking. Animals also gain water by eating, right? So there's certain areas or certain places where organisms need to eat in order to maintain their water stores, right? So think of sea lions, right? Sea lions live in salt water. They are mammals. They do have to osmoregulate. But think of seawater as a desert, right? Seawater is not typically drinkable uh, um, by organisms. You can't. It's way more salty than a body, a living cell, right? The normal salinity concentration of a living cell is 0.9% saline, right? If you've ever gone into the hospital and you saw the drip or the saline bag, they have 0.9% saline solution, right? That's going to be what they put drugs in your body with. That's what they use to clear out IV lines, right? So that's going to be their typical homeostatic salt concentration. The ocean is much more saltier than that. Okay. So sea lions actually gain their liquid or their water from their food. They have to. They cannot drink seawater. Seawater is incredibly dehydrating. It will ruin your kidneys. Okay. You cannot process all that salt, right? That's why they tell you if you're out on a life raft and all you have is seawater, you drink it, you die. It's going to dehydrate you even more. Okay. So homeostasis in the urinary system, you have a tubule, a thin tube within the internal structure of the human kidney. Filtrate fluid extracted by the excretory system from the body or body cavity. The excretory system produces urine from the filtrate after extracting valuable solutes from it concentrating it. Well, it's a bad sentence. A nephron, the tubular excretory unit that and associated blood vessels of the vertebrate kidney. The nephron extracts filtrate from the blood and refines it into urine. We'll talk about that right now. Urine, concentrated filtrate produced by the kidneys and excreted via the bladder. Ureter, a duct that conveys urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. Urinary bladder, the pouch where urine is stored before elimination. Okay, so here we have the anatomy of the urinary system, right? You do have this liquid exchange from the veins and the arteries and your body. Again, your kidney is going to filter out those different fluids that are found in the blood. Again, your kidneys will clean your blood from excess or problematic waste products. Okay, so we have something here. The different nephrons are going to have these different branches here. The artery is going to come in and be filtered through this capsule here, this capsule looking uh, um, area, and this capillary is going to be forced or pushed against this area in the nephron, right? This is going to what's going to be allowing for the fluid to pass through this barrier, this filtrate. Okay, and this is going to go down to what is called a loop of Henle, and the loop of Henle is going to be useful in order to exchange salts. Okay, so it's going to maintain a certain salt concentration. So as the blood travels down through this area, you have the increased salinity that's going to pull water back out of the system, right? And you want that. You do not want to have the loss of salts or the loss of water within from this filtrate, right? let's say if your body's filtering out, waste products, you don't want to be losing water through that process. Okay, you want to lose as little water as possible, right? Um, we do have very inefficient kidneys to some organisms, right? Birds and reptiles have much more efficient excretory systems, right? Because they have a different waste product. They secrete ammonia rather than urea. Okay, whereas urea requires a lot of water to get rid of. Okay, so again, you have that duct, you have the water or the initial filtrate being passed down. Again, the increased saline concentration is going to pull the water back into the body. And then you have this collecting duct, which then goes into the ureter. And in your kidney is multiple ureters that are going to be, or multiple different branches from the nephrons to the ureter. Okay. So again, you have the filtrate that's coming in from the artery, right? And then that artery is going to continue to come here. The vein is where this area here is where you pick up the water, okay? The increased saline concentration, right? It's a counter current exchange. You have the increased saline concentration down here, which is going to pull the water back into the veins. It's going to eventually leave, okay? So higher concentration of water, which makes sense because this has less concentration of water here. And as it comes back around, you can pick more of the water up, right? The saltier conditions are down here. And then you have the less salt concentration here, but it's going to pull the most water out. Okay. All right. And we'll explain the kidneys a little bit better later. But so filtration in the vertebrate kidney, the extraction of water and small solutes, including metabolic waste from the blood by the nephrons. We have reabsorption in the vertebrate kidney, the reclamation of water and valuable solutes from the filtrate. Secretion in the vertebrate kidney, the transport of certain substances such as some ions and drugs from the blood into the filtrate, and excretion, disposal of nitrogen containing metabolic waste. So there's nitrogen containing waste that are quite nasty for the body. Urea is one of them. We excrete urea. Reptiles and birds excrete ammonia. That's going to be a little bit different, right? Than the urea. It's going to require less water. It almost comes out like a paste for them, whereas we require liquid water in order to flush out our waste products. So blood enters and exits the nephron via the capillary, shown in red and blue. Most fluid that exists in the blood at the beginning of the nephron is eventually reabsorbed. Okay, so we have the water or the artery. Again, we have the filtrate being collected by the filter, and then we have this counter current exchange. Okay. And this counter current exchange between the arteries and the veins, again, is important. The loop of Henle is going to be extremely important and the saline concentration is going to be extremely important in reclaiming the water back into the system, right? This outer white surface here is going to be incredibly salty. This is removing the water from this filtrate and allowing for this to come back in, okay? Yeah, and then eventually that liquid gets excreted out. All right. So the composition of human urine, right? So urea, again, is going to be that main nitrogen waste products, but you also have uric acid, creatine, potassium, phosphate, sulfate, sodium, and then chloride. Okay. Again, urea is going to be making the majority of that urine up, and this is going to be that color, that yellow color that we're used to seeing. As you can see, we need a lot of water to get rid of our waste products, so especially urea. Okay. So it's important to go in and have a urine sample done. You can have infections. You can have various other issues with the kidney. Salt concentrations. They do an oval fat body for people that have kidneys that are not functioning properly. You can also check protein. You can check white cells. You can check a lot of various things that shouldn't be in your urine that may or may not be there, right? You should not have protein in your urine, or it should be below a certain level, or else it could be a red flag for certain things. Okay. And that's it for today. All right. So you do have a couple of things you need to take care of. I'll be assigning a couple of labs probably tomorrow. But what I want you to take care of before the end of the week, assignments. Okay. so this homework here, so translation homework, okay? So it's going to be in the imported assignments for my 14282. So that'll be at the very end, right? So it'll be next to your imported assignment. So translation homework. Again, you're going to be, I kind of went over, if you have not watched the recording, watch the recording from, I believe, Thursday. And it talks about, you know, making a protein from the sequences. Okay, so being able to identify, right, a start codon. So AUG is AUG here, methionine, and you're going to be going through and making your own protein. Okay, so here we have a few questions at the end of it. Okay, and this is going to be worth 10 points. So make sure you get this done. Okay, so everyone that's watching this recording, you get this done before you start the labs, and I'll be uploading a couple enzyme labs that we need to get done by the beginning of next week too. Okay, so but this is due. This is due by, I believe, Thursday or Friday. Let me see. Yeah, Friday the 30th. So please have it done by Friday the 30th. Okay, and then I'll have the other homework uploaded shortly. But I'll talk you through that. It's just going to be about enzymes, and we've gone over enzymes before. Okay, so it should be available for your class to. So go to assignments. It's not going to be in the module, so just make sure you go to assignments and check it out. Okay. Yeah, translation homework right here. Okay. Also, make sure you upload your paper topic. All right. I'm going to be uploading the directions about your paper. Paper isn't going to be too long. I'll be going over how to cite and add some information this week. And then you guys should be able to get started. And then I'll have a sign up sheet for the presentations. Okay. Again, it's a short presentation. It's only 10 minutes. And it'll be, it's just, you know, talking between me and you, and it'll be fairly fairly quick. Okay, so yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay, well, that is it for today, and